I caught my husband and my sister having an affair in the soundproof wine cellar of my own estate. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply slid the heavy steel bolt shut, clicked the industrial padlock into place, and cut the power. Then I walked upstairs and asked her husband to help me fix a short circuit. My name is Zora, and at 34 years old, I make my living finding things people try very hard to hide. I am a forensic accountant for one of the top firms in Chicago, which means I spend my days tracking illegal assets for high net worth divorces. But to my family, I am just Zora, the boring bean counter, who pushes paper while her husband Marcus is the visionary entrepreneur. Before I tell you how I brought down my entire family in a single night, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to be the villain to save yourself. It was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary, and we were celebrating at the Obsidian Villa. My mother Viola and my father Otis were holding court in the grand living room, clinking crystal glasses and marveling at the architecture. They believed Marcus had rented this sprawling estate for the weekend as a gift to them. They constantly praised his generosity and business acumen. What they did not know was that Marcus had not paid a dime. The villa belonged to Z Corp, a limited liability company I established 3 years ago. I owned the deed, the furniture, and the very wine they were drinking. But in the narrative, my family constructed Marcus was the king, and I was merely his administrative assistant. The party was in full swing when the vintage Dom Perignon ran low. My sister Tia was lounging on the chaise, looking radiant in a silk dress that cost more than my first car. She was the golden child, the former beauty queen who had married Preston, a white real estate developer from old money. My parents worshipped the ground Preston walked on, mostly because his family name opened doors in circles they desperate wanted to enter. "Zora, be a dear and fetch more champagne," my mother said, waving her empty glass without looking at me. Marcus and Tia seemed to have disappeared, probably planning a surprise for us. I nodded and headed toward the spiral staircase that led to the lower level. I did not mind the errand. It gave me a moment of silence away from my parents' constant comparisons. As I descended into the cool air of the lower level, I noticed the door to the climate-controlled wine storage was ajar. It was a heavy industrial fire door designed to protect the collection in case of an emergency. I was about to push it open when I heard a sound that stopped me cold. It was the unmistakable sound of my husband moaning. I froze, pressing my back against the cold concrete wall. "She is so stiff," Marcus said, his voice echoing slightly in the acoustic space. "Being with her is like sleeping with a spreadsheet. I do not know how much longer I can keep up the act, baby." Then came the giggle. It was a sound I had known my entire life. "Tia." "Just a little longer," Tia whispered. "Preston is such a bore, but his family trust unlocks next month. Once we funnel enough cash into your crypto accounts, we can leave them both. Zora will never figure it out. She is a good accountant, but she is blind when it comes to you." My blood ran cold, then immediately hot. They were not just betraying me physically. They were planning to embezzle from Preston and leave us both with nothing. My sister and my husband. The two people I was supposed to trust most in the world were mocking me in the basement of a house I secretly owned. I looked at the heavy steel door. It was solid, soundproof, and equipped with a heavy-duty hasp for a padlock. My eyes drifted to the workbench nearby where the maintenance crew had left their tools. There, sitting next to a wrench, was a high-security master lock. I did not think. I did not hesitate. My training as a forensic auditor took over. Analyze the situation, secure the assets, neutralize the threat. I stepped forward silently. I grabbed the door handle and pulled it shut with a solid metallic thud. Before they could react to the sound, I slid the steel bolt across and threaded the padlock through the hasp. I snapped it shut. The screaming started almost immediately, but the soundproofing turned their panic into nothing more than a dull, distant vibration. "Hey, open up!" Marcus yelled, his voice muffled. I walked over to the sub-panel on the wall. I found the breaker labeled wine storage and flipped it off. The sliver of light coming from under the door vanished. Now they were in total darkness. I took a deep breath, smoothing the fabric of my dress. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. My face was calm. My eyes were dry. I looked exactly like the boring, reliable Zora they all thought they knew. I walked back up the spiral staircase, the heel of my shoe clicking rhythmically on the steps. When I re-entered the living room, the music was playing soft jazz, and my parents were laughing at something Preston had said. I walked straight over to Preston. He looked up, his blue eyes kind, but tired. "Preston," I said, keeping my voice steady and sweet. "I am so sorry to bother you, but I think we have a situation downstairs. The breaker blew, and the electric door to the wine cellar is jammed. I think I heard someone inside trying to fix it." "You are so good with mechanical things. Could you come take a look? I think it might be a short circuit." Preston followed me without hesitation. A true gentleman to the end. My parents trailed behind us, their champagne glasses still in hand. My mother, Viola, was already complaining about the interruption. "Really, Zora? Can this not wait?" She huffed, her heels clicking impatiently on the stone steps. We were in the middle of a toast. "Marcus and Tia are probably just preparing a surprise presentation for us. You know how creative they are." "I know, Mother," I replied, my voice laced with a concern that was purely performative. "But safety first. The electrical panel is down here and I smell something burning." That part was not a lie. The friction of betrayal had been burning in this house for years. We reached the heavy steel door. The padlock I had snapped shut only minutes ago gleamed under the hallway lights. "That is strange," I said, patting my pockets with feigned confusion. I could have sworn I had the master key. I must have left it in the kitchen. Inside the room, the muffled shouting had stopped, likely replaced by the terrified realization that people were outside. They were probably scrambling in the dark, praying it was just a power outage, praying they had not been caught. Preston examined the lock. He was a man who solved problems for a living, usually with a checkbook, but he was not afraid of manual labor. He spotted the heavy bolt cutters hanging on the maintenance rack wall, the ones the groundskeepers used. "Stand back," Preston said, his voice calm and authoritative. "I will get it open." My father Otis stepped forward, squinting. "Is that really necessary, Preston? We can just wait for the caretaker." "Zora said she heard sparks," Preston replied, gripping the handles of the cutters. "Fire in a wine cellar is no joke, Otis." With a grunt of exertion, Preston clamped the jaws around the shackle of the padlock. There was a loud snap that echoed like a gunshot in the confined hallway. The lock clattered to the concrete floor. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from a dark, cold anticipation. This was it. The moment the facade would crumble. Preston pulled the heavy lever handle and shoved the steel door open. The room beyond was pitch black. The silence was heavy, thick with the scent of expensive wine and nervous sweat. "Hello," Preston called out, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out his phone and tapped the flashlight icon. The beam cut through the darkness like a blade. It swept across the rows of vintage Bordeaux past the tasting table and landed squarely in the center of the room. The scene was frozen in the harsh white LED light like a grotesque tableau. Marcus and Tia were huddled together on a pile of drop cloths in the corner. They were completely naked. Their clothes were scattered haphazardly around them, a trail of silk and linen leading to their shame. Tia threw her hands up to shield her face from the light, letting out a sharp, high-pitched shriek. Marcus scrambled backward, knocking over a stack of wooden crates that crashed loudly to the floor. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. The only sound was the hum of the ventilation system. My mother dropped her champagne glass. It shattered, sending crystal shards and sparkling wine across the floor, but no one looked down. "Tia," my father whispered, his voice trembling. "Marcus." Preston did not say a word. He did not scream. He did not lunge at them. He simply held the light steady for another moment, ensuring he saw every detail, ensuring there was no mistake, no possible explanation other than the ugly truth in front of him. Then he lowered the phone. The light dipped to the floor. He turned around with a slow, deliberate movement that was more terrifying than any outburst of rage. His face was a mask of stone. He looked at me, then at my parents, and walked past us toward the stairs. "Preston, wait!" Tia screamed from the darkness. We heard the frantic rustling of her trying to move, stumbling in the dark. She burst out of the storage room a moment later, clutching a dropcloth to her chest, her hair wild mascara smeared down her cheeks. She ran after him, grabbing his arm as he reached the bottom step. "Baby, please, it is not what it looks like," she wailed, the desperation in her voice grating on my ears. "Let me explain." Preston did not even look at her. He shrugged his arm violently, breaking her grip. The force of it sent Tia stumbling backward. She lost her footing on the slick wine from my mother's broken glass and fell hard onto the concrete, the drop cloth slipping to reveal her shoulder. Preston did not stop. He walked up the spiral staircase and disappeared into the main house. Marcus emerged from the room a second later, hopping as he tried to pull his trousers up, his shirt unbuttoned and hanging loose. He looked from my weeping mother to my stunned father, and then his eyes locked on me. The fear in his face vanished, replaced by a sudden sharp realization. He saw the calm on my face. He saw that I was not crying. He lunged toward me, his face twisting into a snarl. "You locked the door," he shouted, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "The power did not just go out. You cut it. You knew we were in there. You set us up, Zora." The silence in the living room did not last long. By the time Marcus and Tia scrambled up the spiral staircase, clutching their disheveled clothes and their bruised egos, the shock had worn off, replaced by a frantic, desperate need to control the narrative. I stood by the fireplace, watching them emerge like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Tia had wrapped herself in one of the cashmere throws from the sofa, a blanket I had paid for, and threw herself onto the chaise lounge, sobbing with a theatricality that would have impressed a soap opera director. She did not apologize. She did not beg for forgiveness. Instead, she pointed a shaking finger at me, her eyes wild with manufactured victimhood. "She did this," Tia wailed, looking imploringly at our mother. "Zora set us up. She lured us down there and locked the door. She has been jealous of me her whole life because I am happy and she is miserable. She wanted to humiliate me in front of Preston." I watched my parents. A normal parent might have been horrified that their married daughter was sleeping with her sister's husband. But Viola and Otis were not normal parents. They were investors in the brand of Tia, and right now their investment was crashing. They looked at Tia's tears, then at Marcus's angry, flushed face, and finally at me. And in that split second, I saw the decision happen behind their eyes. They needed a villain, and it was not going to be their golden child. Viola crossed the room in 2 strides. I did not flinch even when her hand connected hard with my cheek. The sound of the slap echoed through the high ceilings of the villa. My skin burned, but I did not raise a hand to touch it. I just looked at her, my expression remaining dangerously calm. "You evil little witch!" Viola hissed, her face contorted with rage. "Are you happy now? You want to destroy this family. You want to ruin your sister's life because you cannot stand to see her shine. Do you have any idea what you have done? Preston is going to leave her." "He certainly should," I said, my voice cool and detached. "He just saw his wife naked with his brother-in-law." "Shut your mouth, my father!" Otis roared, stepping in to flank my mother. He towered over me, using the intimidation tactics that had worked when I was a child. But I was not a child anymore, and I knew exactly how much debt he was in. "This is exactly why you are alone, Zora." Otis spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "You are bitter and calculating. You have always been jealous of Tia because she is beautiful and charming, and she married a man with real status. And look at you. You are just a lowly accountant. You push papers for a living while Marcus goes out there and builds a business. You should be grateful Marcus even looks at you, let alone stays with you. You are nothing without him." The irony was so thick, I could taste it like blood in my mouth. They truly believed the lie. They thought Marcus was the provider, the visionary investor who paid for the cars, the dinners, and this villa. They thought I was just the mousy wife balancing his checkbook. They had no idea that Marcus had not made a profit in 5 years. They had no idea that I was a partner at one of the biggest firms in the city, or that my forensic skills were the only reason Marcus wasn't currently in prison for tax evasion. I looked at Marcus. He was standing behind my parents, buttoning his shirt, a smug look returning to his face now that he realized the cavalry had arrived. He knew they would protect him, to protect Tia. He knew my parents valued appearance over integrity. So that is it, I asked quietly. I catch them betraying me, and I am the problem. You are the problem because you made it public. Viola screamed, grabbing my shoulders and shaking me. You exposed them. You could have kept your mouth shut. You could have handled this quietly. But no, you had to drag Preston down there. You wanted to blow everything up. Tia let out another loud wail from the couch. My life is over, she sobbed. Preston is going to cut me off. He is going to cancel the cards. Mom, what am I going to do? Viola rushed back to comfort her, stroking her hair as if she were a toddler who had scraped her knee, not a grown woman who had just imploded 2 marriages. Shh, baby. We will fix it, Viola cooed. We will make it right. Otis turned back to me, his eyes cold and hard. There was no love in them, only calculation. He saw the lifestyle he craved slipping away. If Preston divorced Tia, the access to the country clubs, the galas, and the high society connections would vanish. You are going to fix this, Zora Otis demanded, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. I raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do you propose I do that? You are going to get in your car, and you are going to drive to wherever Preston went? Otis commanded, pointing at the door. You are going to tell him this was a misunderstanding. You are going to tell him it was a sick prank you played because you were drunk or jealous or whatever excuse you need to make up. You will tell him that nothing happened down there, that you staged it. You will take the blame, Zora. You will save your sister's marriage, or so help me God, you will regret it. I looked at them. My mother coddling the adulteress. My husband hiding behind my parents. My father demanding I lie to cover up their filth. They looked at me and saw a doormat. They saw a resource to be used and discarded. They had absolutely no idea that they were standing in a house I owned, threatening the woman who controlled their financial destiny. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. I looked Otis dead in the eye. No, I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. What did you say to me? Otis whispered, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. I said no, I repeated, smoothing the front of my dress. I will not lie for you. I will not lie for her. And I am certainly not lying for him. You heard your father? Marcus sneered, his chest puffed out like a rooster protecting a coop he did not own. If you are not going to help fix this mess you created, then you can get the hell out. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who had spent the last 5 years spending my money driving cars leased in my name and sleeping with my sister was now trying to evict me from a property I purchased with my annual bonus. This is my house, Marcus continued, his voice rising as he performed for my parents. I pay the rent. I pay the bills. I am the one keeping a roof over your ungrateful head. And if I say, get out, you get out. It was a bold lie even for him. Marcus had not paid a utility bill since 2019. But my parents nodded along, bobbing their heads like bobbleheads on a dashboard. He is right, Zora, my mother. Viola chimed in, her face twisted with disdain. You are just a burden here. Marcus works too hard to be disrespected in his own home. If you cannot support the family, then you do not belong in the family. Pack a bag, my father, Otis barked. Actually, do not bother. We will send your things to whatever motel you end up in. Just go. He grabbed my overnight bag, which was sitting by the door from when I arrived earlier that day, and heaved it out onto the front porch. It landed with a dull thud on the stone pavers. And do not think about coming back until you have apologized to your sister and fixed things with Preston. Marcus shouted, slamming the heavy oak door in my face. The lock clicked, the sound reverberated through the night air. I stood there for a moment in the cool evening breeze. Most women would be banging on the door, screaming that they owned the deed, waving the papers in their faces. But I knew better. Information is ammunition, and you do not waste your ammunition shooting at a wall. You wait until you have a clear shot at the target. I picked up my bag. It was light. I had my phone, my wallet, and my laptop. That was all I needed. I opened my rideshare app and selected the most expensive option available. An Uber black SUV was 4 minutes away. I walked down the long driveway, the gravel crunching softly under my designer heels. I could hear them inside, muffled laughter, now that the buzzkill was gone. They were probably opening another bottle of my wine, toasting to their victory, thinking they had won. They thought they had exiled me. In reality, they had just locked themselves inside a cage I controlled. The black Escalade pulled up to the curb. The driver, a man in a sharp suit, stepped out to open the door for me. "Good evening, ma'am," he said. "Good evening," I replied, sliding into the leather interior. "The Ritz-Carlton, please." As the car pulled away, the villa glowing warmly in the rearview mirror, I pulled out my phone. I did not call a friend to cry. I did not call a lawyer yet. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Security and Utilities Department," a computerized voice answered. "Yes," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "This is Zora, owner of the property on Highland Avenue. Account number 4590. I would like to report a security concern. I need an immediate suspension of all electrical services to the property. Yes, cut the power. Now." The lobby of the Ritz-Carlton was a sanctuary of polished marble and hushed tones, a stark contrast to the chaotic betrayal I had just left behind. The concierge looked up the moment I walked through the revolving doors. "Welcome back, Miss Zora. We have prepared the presidential suite for you as usual." He did not ask where my husband was or why I was checking in alone with a single overnight bag. He did not look at me with pity. In this world, I was not Marcus's boring wife or Tia's jealous sister. I was a diamond member, a partner at a top-tier firm, and a woman who commanded respect because I paid for it. I took the elevator to the top floor, the golden doors sliding open to reveal a hallway lined with silk wallpaper. The suite was expansive with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline glittering in the night. It was quiet, it was clean, it was mine. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water from the minibar and sat down at the mahogany desk. I opened my laptop, and the blue light of the screen illuminated my face. It was time to perform financial surgery. Marcus liked to carry a heavy wallet. He had an American Express Platinum card that he flashed at every dinner to impress clients, and a high-limit Visa Infinite. He used to book his first-class flights. He told everyone these were corporate cards from his investment firm, a perk of his position as CEO. The truth was far more embarrassing. They were supplementary cards issued on my account. I was the primary cardholder. I paid the annual fees. I paid the monthly bills. I logged into the banking portal, my fingers flying across the keyboard with the precision of a surgeon. I pulled up the card management screen. There they were. Marcus Vance, supplementary user. I clicked the edit button. Status active changed to status suspended. Reason lost or stolen. I did the same for the debit card he used for gas and groceries and the emergency credit line linked to the house account. In 3 minutes, I had turned him from a high roller into a man with a pocket full of useless plastic. I sat back and took a sip of water, watching the city lights. 5 miles away at the villa, the party was likely reaching its peak. I could imagine the scene clearly. Marcus was probably pouring the last of the vintage wine, sitting in my favorite velvet armchair, with his feet up on the ottoman, feeling like the king of the castle. Tia would be laughing that high, tinkling laugh she used when she felt she had won, drying her crocodile tears and basking in the attention of our parents. My mother and father were likely relaxing, finally free of the daughter who reminded them of their own mediocrity. They were celebrating their victory in a fortress they thought they had conquered. Then the universe shifted. It started with a hum, the low vibration of the central air conditioning unit dying down into silence. The gentle flow of cool air from the vents stopped. Then the lights in the grand foyer flickered once, twice, and died. The crystal chandelier went dark. The music system cut out mid-note, plunging the room into a sudden ringing silence. Total darkness swallowed the villa. Panic would have set in quickly. The villa was isolated, set back from the road by a long driveway, and without the ambient garden lights, it was pitch black. I imagined Marcus fumbling for his phone, cursing about the unreliable grid, and trying to find a flashlight. He would have dialed the power company immediately, his voice dripping with the entitlement of a man who has never had to wait on hold. He would be sweating now as the residual heat of the day began to creep into the house, without the AC to keep it at bay. I could practically hear the conversation. He would demand to speak to a supervisor. He would threaten to sue for the interruption of his parents' anniversary celebration. He would scream, "Do you know who I am?" And then the operator would deliver the news that would shatter his reality. "I am sorry, sir," the operator would say, their voice professional and detached. "We cannot restore power to this address." The account holder personally requested an immediate disconnection of service. "Unless you are the owner listed on the deed, there is nothing we can do." I arranged to meet Preston at the Vault, a private members club in the financial district, where discretion was the primary currency. The lighting was dim, and the leather booths were high-backed, ensuring that no prying eyes could witness the dismantling of two marriages. I arrived 10 minutes early, ordering a sparkling water and organizing the file on the table before me. It was a thick, bound document, not a tablet or a phone. Paper left a trail. Paper was real. Preston arrived precisely on time. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than they had been 24 hours ago, but he was freshly shaved and wearing a suit that cost more than Marcus' annual earnings. He sat down opposite me without a greeting. He signaled the waiter for a Scotch neat and then folded his hands on the table. "My lawyers are drafting the papers," Preston said, his voice devoid of the warmth I had seen at the party. "I am filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery. The video from the cellar doorway is enough, but I want to know why you did it, Zora. Why the theatrics? Why lock them in?" I took a sip of my water. "Because if I had just told you, they would have lied," I replied calmly. "They would have gaslit you, just like they tried to gaslit me. You needed to see it. But the affair is the least of your problems, Preston." He frowned, leaning back slightly. "What are you talking about?" I slid the blue folder across the polished mahogany table. Most scorned wives would bring photos of hotel receipts or text messages filled with heart emojis. "I brought a forensic audit. I am a forensic accountant, Preston," I said, tapping the cover of the file. "I track money for a living, and for the past 6 months I have been tracking yours." He opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first page, which was a summary of transaction flows. His brow furrowed as he turned the page to the detailed bank statements. "What is this?" he asked, looking up at me. "Apollo Ventures. I have never heard of this company." "That is because it does not exist," I explained. "It is a shell company registered in Delaware by Marcus. But look at the funding source." Preston looked back at the document. His finger traced the line items. The transfers were coming from a joint account, his joint account with Tia. "She has been structuring withdrawals," I continued, my voice low and clinical. $9,000 here, $5,000 there. Just under the $10,000 reporting threshold to avoid flagging the bank security algorithms. Over the last 2 years, Tia has siphoned nearly $300,000 from your shared assets and funneled it directly into Marcus' fake investment firm. Preston went pale. The betrayal of the body was one thing, but for a man of his standing, financial betrayal was a violation of intelligence. "They are not just sleeping together, Preston," I said, delivering the final blow. "They are business partners. They are using your family trust distributions to fund the lifestyle Marcus pretends he earned. That Ferrari he leased. Your money. The vacations he took my parents on. Your money. They are robbing you blind to play house." He stared at the numbers, the cold, hard math of his wife disloyalty. He closed the folder, his hand trembling slightly before he balled it into a fist. She told me she was investing in her brand, he whispered. She told me she needed capital for a boutique. There is no boutique, I said. Just crypto wallets and luxury car payments. Preston took a long swallow of his scotch, draining the glass. He set it down with a heavy clink. The sadness in his eyes evaporated, replaced by a cold, ruthless clarity. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw the man who ran a billion-dollar empire. My prenup has an infidelity clause, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. It also has a clause for financial malfeasance. If I can prove she stole from me, she gets nothing. No alimony, no settlement, she leaves with the clothes on her back. You have the proof right there, I pointed to the folder. That audit is court-ready, I certified it myself. Preston reached across the table. He did not offer a hug or a platitude. He offered his hand. I will handle Tia, he said, his grip firm. I will make sure she understands exactly what happens when you breach a contract with my family. And I will handle Marcus, I replied, shaking his hand. He thinks he is a businessman. I am about to introduce him to the IRS. We let go of the handshake. It was a pact sealed in ink and anger. Leave them with nothing, Preston said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Not a single cent, I agreed. The obsidian villa was designed to be an architectural masterpiece, but without electricity, it quickly became a greenhouse. The central air conditioning had been off for hours, and the summer heat was trapped inside the triple-pane glass windows, turning the luxury estate into a stifling box. By midday, the temperature inside had risen to 85 degrees. The silence that had initially been a relief was now oppressive, broken only by the dripping sound coming from the kitchen. The massive refrigerator had lost its battle against the heat, and a puddle of condensation mixed with melted ice was spreading across the imported Italian tile. My parents were not coping well with the change in circumstances. Viola was sitting on the velvet sofa, fanning herself with a magazine, her makeup melting down her face. She looked at Marcus with a mixture of expectation and annoyance, waiting for him to fix the problem as he had promised. This is ridiculous, Viola snapped, her voice echoing in the dim room. Marcus, you said you would handle this. We cannot stay here. It is a sauna. Just book us a suite at the Four Seasons. I need a bath and room service. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead, his shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest. He looked flustered, his usual arrogance replaced by a frantic energy. Do not worry, Viola, he said, pulling out his phone. I am booking it right now. Zora thinks she can play games, but I have my own resources. He opened the hotel booking app and selected the presidential suite at the nearest five-star resort. He entered his payment details using the American Express Platinum card he loved to flash at dinners. He hit confirm. A second later, a red notification popped up on the screen. Transaction declined. He frowned and tried again. Declined. He pulled out the Visa Infinite card, the one with the $50,000 limit. He typed in the numbers, his fingers shaking slightly. Processing. Declined. What is taking so long? Otis grumbled from the armchair where he was nursing a glass of warm water. There is a glitch with the bank system. Marcus lied, his voice pitching higher. He tried the debit card. Declined. He tried the emergency credit line. Account suspended. The color drained from his face. He stared at the phone, realizing with dawning horror that every single card in his wallet was a supplementary card issued under my primary account. I had cut the cord. Tia, who had been pacing the room checking her makeup in her pocket mirror, stopped. Just let me do it, she said, rolling her eyes. Preston will pay for it. He is probably cooling off by now anyway. He would never let me suffer like this. She pulled out her phone and logged into her joint banking app. She navigated to the checking account, expecting to see the six-figure balance that was always there. Instead, she saw a gray screen with a lock icon. Account frozen. Contact branch administrator. She tapped the screen furiously. What is going on? She whispered. It says frozen. I cannot access the cash. I cannot transfer anything. Panic began to ripple through the room. They were stranded. Their cars were low on gas because they always assumed they could fill up on the company card. They had no cash because they lived their lives on credit, and now they had no way to leave. By evening, the sun went down and the villa was plunged into total darkness. The beautiful floor-to-ceiling windows now looked out into a black void. There was no light to cook, so they raided the pantry. The gourmet meal Daniel the chef was supposed to prepare never happened. Instead, my family gathered around the dining table illuminated by the flashlight from a dying cell phone. They ate cold canned soup directly from the tin using plastic spoons because the dishwasher was full of dirty dishes they could not wash without water. The scene was pathetic. The golden child, the visionary entrepreneur, and the high society parents huddled in the dark, eating like refugees in a mansion worth millions. "This is Zora's fault," Viola screamed suddenly, hurling her spoon across the room. "She is doing this to spite us. She is trying to kill us." She grabbed her phone and dialed my number. I watched the call come in from the comfort of my suite at the Ritz-Carlton, where I was enjoying a room-service lobster bisque. I watched the screen light up with the word mother. I did not decline it. I did not answer it. I simply pressed the button on the side of my phone that blocked the contact. Back at the villa, Viola listened to the call go straight to a disconnect tone. She screamed a raw, ugly sound of impotent rage that echoed through the dark, empty house. They were alone. They were broke. And for the first time in their lives, they were completely powerless. Marcus arrived at the address listed on an old tax form he had found in a box of documents years ago. It was a nondescript single-story brick building in a strip mall, sandwiched between a nail salon and a dry cleaning service. He parked his car haphazardly across two spaces and stormed toward the entrance, clutching a manila envelope. He looked disheveled, his shirt wrinkled and stained with sweat, his eyes wild with a mixture of exhaustion and manic determination. He pushed through the glass door expecting a bustling corporate headquarters, but found only a quiet waiting room with two chairs and a receptionist chewing gum behind a laminate desk. "Where is she?" Marcus demanded, slamming the envelope onto the counter. "Tell Zora to get out here. I know she is hiding." The receptionist looked up unimpressed. "Sir, do you have an appointment?" "I do not need an appointment. I am her husband," Marcus shouted. "And I am here to serve her with divorce papers. I am done with her games. I am taking everything. Half the assets, the house, the cars, alimony. I want compensation for the emotional damage she caused by trapping me like an animal. She thinks she is smart, but she is about to find out what happens when you mess with a businessman." The receptionist typed a name into her computer and frowned. "Sir Zora Vance does not work here. This is a satellite processing center for tax season overflow. Ms. Vance is a senior partner. Her office is in the Sky Tower downtown on the 45th floor." Marcus froze. He blinked rapidly, his brain struggling to process the information. Downtown. Partner. 45th floor. He had spent 5 years believing I was a mid-level manager, pushing papers in a cubicle. He had no idea who he was actually married to. But instead of shame, a new wave of entitlement washed over him. If I was richer than he thought, then there was even more for him to take. "She is lying to everyone," he muttered, his face twisting into a sneer. "Hiding her money. Hiding herself. Well, she cannot hide from the truth." He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly. He opened his social media app and started a live stream. He held the phone up, framing his face with the sad fluorescent lighting of the waiting room in the background. "Hey everyone, it is Marcus," he said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "I am here at my wife's office, or at least where she claims she works. I have been trying to serve her papers, but she is dodging me." He paced around the small room, panning the camera to show the confused receptionist. "I have been living a nightmare, guys. My wife Zora, she is abusive. She is controlling. She locked me in a dark basement without food or water just because she was jealous. She cut off my bank cards. She left me and her own elderly parents to rot. And now I find out she has been hiding millions from me. She built her career on my back, while I sacrificed everything to support her, and now she wants to leave me with nothing. He looked into the camera, tears welling up in his eyes on command. I am the victim here. She manipulated me. She trapped me. And now, she is trying to destroy me financially. I need your help. Share this video. Let the world know what kind of monster Zora Vance is. Let us get justice for the good guys. I watched the performance from the comfort of my suite at the Ritz-Carlton. The live stream was playing on my tablet, propped up against a vase of fresh orchids. I watched him wipe a fake tear. I watched the comments rolling in, some supportive but many questioning why a successful businessman was crying in a strip mall. He truly believes it, I said softly, shaking my head. He believes the villa is his. He believes my success belongs to him. I reached for my phone and dialed a number stored under the name, The Shark. It was Evelyn, my personal attorney, a woman who ate hedge fund managers for breakfast. Evelyn, I said when she answered on the first ring. Are you seeing this? I am watching it right now. Zora. Evelyn's voice was crisp and sharp like a guillotine blade. He is digging his own grave with every word. Defamation, harassment, and admitting to financial dependence, all in one video. He wants half, I said, taking a sip of tea. He wants the villa. Evelyn laughed, a cold, dry sound. He can want the moon, Zora. The villa is held in a blind trust owned by an LLC registered before you even met him. The prenuptial agreement he signed without reading protects all premarital assets and future earnings derived from them. And since he just admitted on a public forum that you are the primary earner, his alimony claim is dead in the water. Good, I said, my eyes fixed on Marcus' pixelated face as he begged for likes. File the motion, Evelyn. It is time to teach my husband a lesson about the difference between a wife and a cash cow. Leave him with nothing but his debts. The annual Starlight Gala was the kind of event where people paid $5,000 a plate just to breathe the same air as the city's elite. For my sister Tia, it was hunting ground. Despite the implosion of her marriage and the freezing of her assets, she had scraped together enough cash, probably by pawning the last of her jewelry, to rent a gown and hire a car. She arrived at the museum steps looking every bit the desperate socialite trying to outrun a scandal. She believed her charm was a currency that never devalued. She thought she could walk in, bat her eyelashes at a hedge fund manager, and secure her next safety net before the ink on the divorce papers was dry. I watched from the tinted window of my limousine, which was idling 3 cars back in the VIP line. Tia strode up to the check-in desk, her head held high, a practiced smile plastered on her face. She leaned in to whisper to the event coordinator, a woman named Beatrice, who had known our family for years. I saw Tia gesture toward the ballroom doors, her hand fluttering dismissively, as if a missing invitation was merely a clerical error. Beatrice did not smile back. She looked down at her tablet, then back at Tia, her expression one of polite, icy rejection. I could see Tia's smile falter. Her gestures became more animated. She pointed at the banner hanging above the entrance, which listed the Sterling Family Trust as the primary benefactor. She was arguing her status as the wife of the chairman. Beatrice said something that made Tia recoil as if she had been slapped. The coordinator signaled to the 2 large security guards standing by the velvet rope. They stepped forward, crossing their arms. Tia began to shout, her voice carrying over the polite murmur of the arriving guests. "You cannot do this!" she screamed, her composure cracking. "I am Mrs. Preston Sterling. I am the hostess of this event. My husband will hear about this." Beatrice spoke loud enough for the nearby reporters to hear. "Mr. Sterling is the one who updated the guest list, Mrs. Sterling. He left specific instructions. You have been blacklisted from this event and all future foundation activities. You are trespassing." The paparazzi, who had been bored waiting for a celebrity, suddenly woke up. Flashes erupted like lightning, blinding Tia as she stood there humiliated and barred from the world she thought she owned. She looked around wildly, searching for an ally, searching for a way out. That was my cue. My driver opened the door and I stepped out onto the red carpet. I was wearing a structural midnight blue gown that whispered power, not desperation. The flashbulbs turned toward me, but I did not shrink away. Beatrice looked up and her face transformed into a mask of relief and gratitude. She hurried down the steps past my screaming sister to greet me. "Welcome, Ms. Vance," Beatrice gushed, taking my hand. "We were so worried you might not make it. The board is thrilled to finally meet their new anonymous gold sponsor. Your contributions saved the art program this year." Tia froze. Her mouth hung open. She looked at Beatrice, then at me, her brain struggling to compute the reality. The sister she called a bean counter, the sister she pitied, was being welcomed as a philanthropist while she was being treated like a crasher. "Zora." Tia gasped, her voice trembling. You are the sponsor. But how? You do not have that kind of money." I stopped just inches from her. I looked at her rented dress, her frantic eyes, and the security guards closing in on her. I did not say a word. I simply adjusted my silk wrap and looked through her as if she were made of glass. "Remove her," Beatrice ordered the guards. "She is disturbing our honored guests." One guard grabbed Tia by the elbow. The other took her shoulder. She shrieked, kicking out as they began to drag her away from the entrance, her heels scraping against the pavement. The cameras captured every second of her downfall, the golden child tarnished and tossed aside. I turned back to Beatrice and smiled. "Shall we go inside, Beatrice? I believe there is a champagne toast waiting." We walked up the stairs, leaving the sound of my sister's screams behind us, fading into the night air. I did not look back. I had a gala to attend, and for the first time in my life I was walking in through the front door as exactly who I was. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, a theater of wood paneling and fluorescent lights where dreams went to die. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table looking surprisingly put together, given that he had spent the last week living in a mansion without running water. He had shaved and managed to find a suit that was not too wrinkled, likely pulled from the back of his car. He leaned over to whisper to his attorney, a strip mall lawyer named Saul, who looked like he had bought his degree online. Marcus shot me a look of pure arrogance. He believed he had me cornered. In his mind, I was the shrewish wife hiding a secret fortune that he was entitled to half of. He thought the discovery process would be his golden ticket. The judge, a stern woman named Honorable Edith Black, adjusted her glasses and looked down at the filings. "Mr. Vance, you are petitioning for spousal support, equitable distribution of the marital residence and legal fees based on the claim that your wife has hidden substantial assets and committed financial abuse. Is that correct?" Marcus stood up, smoothing his tie. "Yes, Your Honor. My wife Zora Vance has been deceiving me for years. She pretends to be a low-level employee, but I have proof she is hiding millions. I am the one who built that home. I am the one who maintained our lifestyle. She cut off my access to my own money to punish me. I am destitute because of her cruelty." My lawyer Evelyn stood up. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Your Honor, we would like to submit Exhibit A into evidence. It is the property deed for the estate on Highland Avenue. As you can see, the property is not owned by Mr. Vance, nor is it owned by Ms. Vance personally. It is the sole asset of Z Corp LLC, a limited liability company registered in the state of Delaware 3 years prior to the marriage." Marcus scoffed loud enough for the bailiff to glare at him. "That is just a shell company she made up to hide it from me." "It is marital property." Evelyn ignored him. "And if you will look at Exhibit B, Your Honor, these are the bank statements for the property's maintenance mortgage and utility payments for the last 5 years. Every single cent came from a corporate account funded exclusively by Zora Vance. Mr. Vance has never contributed a single dollar to the household. In fact, he is listed on the guest registry as a long-term occupant with 0 equity interest." The judge's eyebrows shot up. "A guest. Mr. Vance, Marcus spluttered. That is a lie. I am a businessman. I trade crypto. I have investments. Evelyn slid another document across the bench. Exhibit C, Your Honor. These are the joint tax returns filed for the last 3 years. Ms. Vance is a senior forensic audit partner at one of the Big Four firms, earning a base salary in the mid-six figures plus bonuses. Mr. Vance reported an adjusted gross income of $0 for the last 3 years. In fact, he claimed a loss of $4,000 last year for a business venture involving customized vape pens. The courtroom was silent. The reality of the numbers stripped Marcus naked, faster than I ever could. He was not a provider. He was a dependent, an expensive pet that I had finally decided to stop feeding. The judge looked at Marcus with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Mr. Vance, you are asking for half of a house you do not own based on income you did not earn while claiming financial abuse from the woman who has been solely supporting you. Is that the gist of your argument? Marcus' face turned a deep blotchy red. She tricked me, he stammered. She let me believe I was in charge. That is fraud. That is not fraud, Mr. Vance, the judge said, closing the file with a sharp snap. That is charity, and it appears the charity has run out. I am denying the request for emergency spousal support. Furthermore, since you have no legal claim to the residence and have been engaging in harassment via social media, I am granting the defendant's motion for immediate exclusive possession. She looked down at Marcus, who was now gripping the table as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises, Mr. Vance. You will be allowed 1 police escort to retrieve personal effects. If you are found on the property after noon tomorrow, you will be arrested for trespassing. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged down, sealing his fate. Marcus turned to look at me, his eyes wide with shock. I did not smile. I simply checked my watch. The countdown had begun. The exodus from the villa was quiet and humiliating. Under the watchful eye of a police escort, Marcus loaded his few boxes of designer clothes into the back of his leased sedan, which was probably next on the repossession list. My parents, Viola and Otis, shuffled out behind him, clutching garbage bags filled with their belongings. They looked small and defeated, stripped of the borrowed grandeur they had worn like a costume for 40 years. They were no longer the lords of the manor. They were just 2 elderly people being evicted from a house they had no right to be in. They had no choice but to retreat to their safety net. The old bungalow on Elm Street. It was the house I grew up in, the house they had owned free and clear for 15 years. It was modest compared to the villa, but it was theirs. Or at least that is what they believed. I can picture the drive. Marcus sweating behind the wheel, his knuckles white, trying to come up with a lie that could cover a crater the size of the Grand Canyon. Viola in the passenger seat muttering about how I had disrespected them. Otis in the back staring out the window wondering how his retirement plan had turned into a nightmare. They pulled up to the curb expecting sanctuary. What they found was a padlock and a neon orange sticker plastered across the front door. Notice of foreclosure. Property of the bank. Do not enter. Otis stepped out of the car, first his knees popping. He squinted at the door. What is that? Marcus, what is on the door? Marcus stayed in the car for a long moment. He must have considered driving away, leaving them there on the sidewalk. But he had nowhere to go either. Slowly, he opened the door and stepped out. It must be a mistake, Marcus said, his voice cracking. Probably just a clerical error. I will call the bank in the morning. Otis walked up the path, pushing past the overgrown weeds. He ripped the sticker off the door and read the fine print. His hands began to shake. The paper rattled like a dry leaf. Default on mortgage payments. He read aloud, his voice rising in disbelief. Outstanding balance of $200,000. We do not have a mortgage, Marcus. We paid this house off in 2005. Viola hurried up the steps, snatching the paper from him. This says the loan was taken out 6 months ago. Secured by the deed. Signatories. Otis Vance and Marcus Vance. She turned slowly to look at her son-in-law, the man she had championed, the man she had chosen over her own daughter. Marcus Otis said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Why is your name on a loan against my house?" Marcus backed away, holding his hands up as if to ward off a physical blow. "It was an investment, Otis. A sure thing. You remember, the crypto opportunity. I told you we needed liquidity to buy into the presale. You signed the papers. You said you trusted me." "I signed papers for a retirement fund transfer," Otis roared. "You told me it was a transfer. You mortgaged my home. I was going to pay it back." Marcus stammered, tears of panic streaming down his face. "It was supposed to triple in value in a month. I spent it on Tia. She needed things. She wanted the lifestyle, Otis. I did it for her." The truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He had gambled their home, their security, their entire life savings on a digital coin that did not exist to buy purses and vacations for my sister. He had taken the only thing they actually owned and torched it. "You stole our house!" Viola screamed. Her voice broke into a high keen of pure devastation. She dropped the foreclosure notice and lunged at him. Her manicured nails, usually so perfect, clawed at his face. She struck him hard across the cheek, then again pummeling his chest with her fists. "You thief! You liar! We have nowhere to go." Marcus tried to shield himself, stumbling back toward the car, but he tripped over one of the garbage bags of clothes. He fell onto the dry grass, covering his head, as my mother rained blows down on him, sobbing hysterically. Otis did not join in. He stood on the porch of the house he could no longer enter, staring at the orange residue left by the sticker on the door. His face turned a gray, ashen color. He reached up his hand, clutching at his left arm. He made a small choking sound. Otis Viola screamed, turning away from Marcus. My father collapsed. He hit the wooden porch with a heavy thud. It was chaos. Neighbors were peering out of their windows, phones raised to record the spectacle. Marcus was scrambling in the grass, bleeding from a scratch on his cheek. Viola was on her knees beside her husband, screaming for help. And in the distance, the wail of a siren grew louder, coming to collect the wreckage of a family that had bet everything on the wrong horse. They were homeless. They were broken. And for the first time, they had no one left to blame but themselves. I sat in the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton, watching the afternoon light filter through the high windows. The air smelled of fresh lilies and old money, a stark contrast to the desperation that walked through the revolving doors. My mother Viola looked like a ghost of the woman who had hosted the anniversary party just a week ago. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes were swollen. She spotted me sitting in the high-backed velvet chair and rushed over, falling to her knees on the marble floor right in front of me. "Zora, please," she sobbed, grabbing my hand before I could pull it away. "You have to help us. Your father is in the county hospital. They put him in a hallway because we do not have insurance anymore. We have nowhere to go. The house is gone, Zora. They took everything." I looked down at her. This was the woman who had raised me, the woman who had taught me to tie my shoes and told me to sit up straight. But she was also the woman who had stood by while my husband threw me out of my own home. "Get up, Mother," I said, my voice low. "You are making a scene." She scrambled into the chair opposite me, wiping her nose with a crumpled tissue. "We are family, Zora," she pleaded, playing the card she had used to manipulate me for decades. "Blood is thicker than water. I am your mother. I gave birth to you. You cannot let us sleep on the street. You cannot let your father die like a pauper. We made a mistake. We know that now. Marcus tricked us." I took a sip of my tea. "Marcus tricked you, yes," I agreed. "But that is not why you are here begging. You are here because you backed the wrong horse." I leaned forward. "I need to ask you something, Mother, and I want the truth. If you lie to me, I will walk away right now and you will never see me again." She nodded frantically, her hands trembling. "Anything, Zora, anything." Why did you slap me? I asked. She froze. The night I caught them, I continued. Why did you hit me? And when Marcus told me to get out of my own house, why did you not say a word? Why did you stand there and watch him throw my bag onto the driveway? I am your daughter. He was just a son-in-law. Why did you choose him over me? Viola looked down at her lap. She picked at a loose thread on her skirt. The silence stretched thin and tight. Tell me, I pressed. Because we thought he was the golden goose, she whispered, her voice so quiet I almost missed it. I sat back, stunned by the brutality of her honesty. We thought he was the one with the money, she said, looking up, tears streaming down her face again. He had the cars, the suits, the big talk. We thought you were just his assistant, Zora. We thought you were just lucky he married you. We are old, we have no savings. Marcus promised he would take care of us. He promised us a retirement in luxury. She reached for my hand again, but I pulled it back. I slapped you because I thought you were ruining our ticket to a good life, she admitted. I thought if we took his side, he would keep paying for everything. I needed the money, Zora. I just wanted to be safe. There it was. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about loyalty. It wasn't even about Tia. It was a transaction. She had sold her loyalty to the highest bidder, and now that the check had bounced, she was trying to renegotiate the contract. I reached into my purse, Viola watching me with a spark of hope in her eyes, expecting a checkbook or a credit card. Instead, I pulled out a white envelope and slid it across the table. What is this? She asked, picking it up with shaking hands. It is a voucher, I said, standing up. For the Motel 6 by the highway. I paid for 3 nights. 3. It includes a continental breakfast. She stared at the envelope, her face crumbling. A motel. Zora, you are a partner at a firm. You own a mansion. You can afford better than this. I can, I replied, looking down at her. But I choose not to invest in people who view me as an insurance policy. You wanted security, Mother. You traded your daughter for it. This is the return on your investment. I signaled for the concierge. 3 nights, I repeated. After that, you are on your own. Figure it out, just like I had to. I turned and walked toward the elevators, leaving my mother weeping in the lobby, holding a coupon for a 2-star motel while I went back up to my penthouse. I did not feel guilty. I felt lighter. The transaction was finally closed. The law offices of Sterling and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of the tallest building in the city, a fortress of glass and steel that screamed old money and ruthless litigation. Tia walked into the conference room with her head held high, wearing a white suit she had bought on credit that morning, trying to project the image of a wronged wife ready for war. She sat down at the long marble table across from Mr. Sterling Preston's family attorney, a man who had been drafting ironclad contracts since before Tia was born. She did not wait for pleasantries. She slammed her hand down on the table. I want $50 million, Tia declared, her voice echoing in the vast room. I want the penthouse in Manhattan. I want the beach house in the Hamptons. And I want $500,000 a year in alimony for the next 20 years. Preston humiliated me. He abandoned me. I gave him the best years of my life, and I will not be tossed aside like trash. If he wants this divorce to be quiet, he is going to pay for my silence. Mr. Sterling did not blink. He did not look intimidated. He looked bored. He adjusted his silk tie and opened a thin leather folder in front of him. He did not speak immediately, letting the silence stretch out until Tia began to fidget in her chair. Mrs. Sterling. He began, his voice dry and devoid of emotion. I believe you are laboring under a significant misapprehension regarding your position here. You are not here to negotiate a settlement. You are here to surrender. Tia scoffed, forcing a laugh. Surrender. I have rights. I am his wife. The law says marital assets are split 50-50. The law applies to marriages based on good faith, Mr. Sterling corrected. However, your marriage is governed by a prenuptial agreement. Specifically, I would direct your attention to Section 8, Paragraph C, the infidelity clause. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Tia glanced at it, her eyes narrowing. That is standard, she dismissed. Everyone has that. You have to prove it. And you cannot prove anything. Zora staged that whole thing in the wine cellar. It was a setup. Any judge will see that. Sterling sighed, the sound of a man who was tired of dealing with amateurs. He reached under the table and produced a tablet. He tapped the screen and slid it toward her. We are not relying solely on the incident at the villa, although that is certainly compelling. Thanks to the forensic assistance provided by your sister, Ms. Zora Vance, we have compiled a comprehensive digital footprint of your activities. Tia looked down at the screen. It was not the wine cellar. It was a video from a hotel corridor in Miami dated 3 months ago. It showed Tia entering a room, followed 2 minutes later by Marcus. Then another video from a parking garage. Then a series of text messages recovered from a cloud backup she thought she had deleted. The texts were graphic. They detailed the affair. They detailed the plan to siphon money from Preston. They detailed her contempt for her husband. This evidence has been authenticated, Mr. Sterling said. It proves a pattern of adultery and conspiracy to commit fraud dating back 18 months. Under the terms of the prenup, any act of infidelity results in the immediate forfeiture of all claims to marital assets, spousal support, and any potential settlement. In layman terms, Mrs. Sterling, you get 0. Tia stared at the tablet, her face draining of color. 0. But the house, the cars, they belong to the Sterling Trust. Mr. Sterling continued, relentless. You have no claim to them. Furthermore, we have the forensic audit regarding the $300,000 you embezzled from the joint accounts. Preston is generous, so he has decided not to press criminal charges for grand larceny, provided you return all gifts purchased with those funds immediately. He pushed a plastic bin across the polished table. It looked like a recycling bin, cheap and gray. Please place the engagement ring, the wedding band, the Cartier watch, and the keys to the Range Rover in the bin, Mr. Sterling ordered. Tia clutched her hand to her chest, covering the 4-carat diamond ring. No, this is mine. He gave it to me. It was a conditional gift, given in contemplation of a faithful marriage, Mr. Sterling said, his voice hardening. The condition was broken. It is no longer yours. If you leave this room with that ring, we will have you arrested for theft within the hour. The police are waiting in the lobby. Tia looked at the door, then back at the lawyer. She saw no pity in his eyes. She realized with a sickening lurch that the game was over. Her beauty, her charm, her tears, none of it worked here. She was up against a contract she had signed without reading because she was too busy counting the money she thought she would spend. Trembling, she slid the ring off her finger. It clattered into the plastic bin, then the watch. She dug the car keys out of her purse and dropped them in. Everything Mr. Sterling said. The earrings. She unhooked the diamond studs from her ears and dropped them. She felt naked, stripped of the armor of wealth she had worn for 3 years. You can keep the clothes on your back, Mr. Sterling said, closing the folder. Though I believe the suit was purchased with a supplementary card that has now been cancelled. Consider it a parting gift. Now get out. Tia stood up, her legs shaking. She grabbed her empty purse and walked to the door. She did not look back. She took the elevator down 40 floors, her stomach churning. She walked out of the building and onto the busy sidewalk. The wind whipped her hair across her face. She reached for her phone, her fingers fumbling. She needed Marcus. They were in this together. He would have a plan. She dialed his number. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then the voicemail clicked on. You have reached Marcus Vance. I am currently unavailable. She called again, straight to voicemail. She stood there on the street corner, a woman who had thought she was a queen, now realizing she was just a pawn who had been sacrificed. She had no car, no money, no husband. And the sister she had betrayed was somewhere high above in a penthouse, watching the world burn. I sat in my corner office on the 45th floor, surrounded by screens that glowed with the intricate spiderweb of my husband's financial life. For the past week, while my family imploded and my sister lost everything, I had been following the money. The forensic audit I gave Preston was just the tip of the iceberg, a simple proof of theft to secure a divorce. But what I was looking at now was something far darker and far more dangerous. Marcus always claimed he was a venture capitalist, investing in emerging markets and cryptocurrency. It was the perfect cover for a man who did not actually understand economics, but possessed a flexible morality. I had tracked the $200,000 he stole from my parents' home equity loan. I traced the $300,000 he siphoned from Preston's accounts. But the numbers did not add up. There were deposits hitting his shell company accounts that were far too large to be explained by family theft alone. Monthly transfers of $50,000 labeled as consulting fees from companies that had no websites, no employees, and addresses that led to empty lots in industrial zones. The money would hit his account stay for 24 hours and then be converted into obscure cryptocurrencies and transferred to wallets hosted in non-extraditable jurisdictions. It was a classic layering scheme. My husband, the failed entrepreneur, was not just a thief, he was a money launderer. I cross-referenced the shell companies with a database of known entities flagged by federal watchdogs. The names matched. These were front companies associated with an Eastern European syndicate known for trafficking and illegal gambling rings. Marcus likely thought he was just moving money for some silent investors skimming a fee off the top to fund his delusions of grandeur. He probably felt important, a player in the big leagues. He was too stupid to realize he was the disposable mule, the fall guy whose name was on every single incriminating document. I printed the final report. It was 300 pages of damning evidence. Wire transfers, IP logs, chat logs he thought were encrypted. I had everything. This was not a civil matter anymore. This was federal. This was prison time measured in decades, not years. I placed the stack of papers into a thick manila envelope. I did not write a return address. I simply printed 2 labels. One for the Federal Bureau of Investigation White-Collar Crimes Division, the other for the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Unit. I walked to the mail chute in the hallway. I held the envelope for a moment, feeling the weight of it. This was the final nail. I was not just divorcing Marcus. I was burying him. I let go. The packet slid down the chute, vanishing into the system. It was done. Across town, in a motel room that smelled of stale cigarettes and despair, Marcus Vance was pacing a hole in the cheap carpet. He had been hiding out at the Sleep Easy Inn for 3 days, ever since the judge ordered him out of the villa. He had sold his Cartier watch for cash, a fraction of its value, just to pay for the room and a burner phone. He was terrified. Not of me anymore, but of the people he owed money to. The transfer he was supposed to make on Monday had failed because I froze the accounts. His contacts were calling. They were not leaving polite voicemails. They were sending pictures of his parents' new location at the homeless shelter. Marcus grabbed a bottle of cheap vodka from the nightstand and took a swig. He needed a plan. Maybe he could flee to Mexico. But he had no passport. It was still in the safe at the villa, and I had changed the combination. He sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, his head in his hands. He was Marcus Vance. He was supposed to be a millionaire. He was supposed to be driving a Ferrari, not hiding in a room with water stains on the ceiling, listening to the couple next door arguing. A noise outside caught his attention. It started as a low wail, distant and mournful, but it grew louder and sharper with every passing second. Sirens. Lots of them. He went to the window and peeled back the blackout curtain just an inch. His heart stopped. The parking lot was awash in flashing blue and red lights. Police cruisers had blocked the entrance and exit. An armored tactical vehicle was rolling slowly over the speed bumps. He stumbled back from the window, dropping the vodka bottle. It shattered, soaking his socks, but he did not notice. They were here for him. He thought about the fraud against my parents. He thought about the theft from Preston. But when he saw the jackets of the agents swarming the courtyard with the bright yellow letters FBI emblazoned on the back, he knew it was much worse. "This is the police! Come out with your hands up!" A voice boomed over a loudspeaker, shaking the thin walls of the room. "Marcus Vance, we have a federal warrant for your arrest." He looked around the room frantically like a trapped animal. There was no back exit. The bathroom window was too small. He was cornered. The heavy thud of boots on the walkway outside sounded like thunder. Then came the pounding on the door, a rhythmic, aggressive beat that signaled the end of his freedom. "Open the door, Marcus, or we will breach it," the voice shouted. Marcus sank to his knees on the wet carpet, amidst the broken glass and the smell of cheap alcohol. He raised his hands behind his head, tears streaming down his face, as the door exploded inward. The game was over. The Cook County Department of Corrections was a monochromatic world of gray concrete and fluorescent buzzing, a stark contrast to the golden lighting of the Ritz-Carlton where I had spent my morning. I walked through the security checkpoint, my Hermes bag scanning through the X-ray machine like an alien artifact. The air smelled of industrial bleach and stale sweat, a scent that clung to the back of your throat. I sat in the visitor booth on the clean side of the reinforced glass. I crossed my legs and waited, checking the time on my watch. I had a flight to catch in 4 hours, but I had one last loose end to tie up. When the guard brought Marcus in, I almost did not recognize him. It had only been 3 days since the raid at the motel, but he had aged 10 years. The orange jumpsuit hung off his frame, making him look small and pathetic. His hair, usually perfectly styled with expensive product, was greasy and matted. There were dark circles under his eyes and a cut on his lip that suggested he was not having an easy time in general population. He saw me and his face crumpled. He rushed to the stool and snatched up the receiver, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. "Zora. Oh, thank God you came," he gasped, pressing his forehead against the glass. "You have to get me out of here, Zora. It is a nightmare. They put me in with animals. I have not slept. I have not eaten. You have to help me." I picked up my receiver, slowly holding it a few inches from my ear. I did not say anything. I just watched him unravel. "The federal agents, they are talking about 20 years. Marcus rambled, his eyes darting around nervously. "They say I am a flight risk. They set the bail at $2 million. I do not have it, Zora. You know I do not have it. But you do. You are a partner. You have assets. You can put up the bond. Please, Zora. I am begging you." He paused, waiting for me to speak, to offer the salvation he had always expected from me. When I remained silent, he switched tactics, desperation clawing at his throat. "I will make it up to you, Zora. I swear. I will sign whatever you want. I will sign a post-nuptial. I will give you full custody if we ever have kids. I will work for you. I will be your driver, your assistant, your janitor. I do not care. I will be your slave for the rest of my life. Just please do not leave me in here." Tia meant nothing to me. She seduced me. She is a witch, Zora. I hate her. It was always you. You are the only one who ever cared about me. I listened to him throwing my sister under the bus, the same way he had thrown me aside for years. It was pathetic, but it was also clarifying. There was no bottom to his selfishness. There was no redemption arc for a man like Marcus. I leaned forward slightly, my reflection ghosting over his desperate face in the glass. "I am not here to bail you out, Marcus," I said, my voice calm and devoid of pity. "I am here to tell you that I am the reason you are in here." He blinked, confusion clouding his panic. "What?" "The file the FBI has," I continued. "The wire transfers, the shell companies, the tax evasion. I gave it to them. I spent the last week compiling every single digital footprint you left. I traced the money you stole from my parents. I traced the money you stole from Preston. And I traced the money you washed for the cartel." His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You did this." "Yes," I said. And do not think for a second that you can talk your way out of it. The evidence is forensic. It is mathematical. It does not care about your charm or your excuses. But I am your husband, he whispered, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the grime on his cheeks. How could you do this to family? I smiled then. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who had finished playing with its food. Do you remember the wine cellar, Marcus? I asked, Softy. Do you remember laughing about how blind I was? You mocked me while you spent my money and slept with my sister. You locked me in the darkness of deception for 3 years, letting me believe we were building a life together while you were digging my grave. He sobbed, shaking his head violently. I am sorry, Zora. I am so sorry. It is too late for sorry, I said. You thought the darkness was your playground. You thought you could hide there forever. Well, now the lights are on, Marcus, and I am leaving you in the only place you belong. Now it is your turn to enjoy the real darkness. I hung up the phone. The click echoed in the small booth. I stood up, smoothing the fabric of my dress. Marcus screamed. It was a raw, primal sound of absolute despair. He slammed his fist against the glass over and over again, screaming my name, begging, cursing, wailing. The guard stepped forward, grabbing him by the shoulder and hauling him back. I did not look back. I turned my heel and walked toward the heavy steel door at the end of the corridor. The sound of his screams faded as the door clicked shut behind me, leaving him trapped in the cage he had built for himself. I walked out into the bright, blinding sunshine of the afternoon, feeling the warmth on my skin. I was free. The county hospital smelled of rubbing alcohol and despair, a scent that seemed to seep into the peeling paint of the waiting room walls. It was the kind of place where people ended up when they had run out of options, and running out of options was exactly what had happened to Otis Vance. I walked through the sliding glass doors, my heels clicking on the scuffed linoleum, drawing the eyes of exhausted nurses and patients waiting for their numbers to be called. I was out of place here in my tailored blazer and designer sunglasses, but I was not here to blend in. I was here to close a ledger. I approached the billing counter, where a harried administrator was buried under a mountain of paperwork. Excuse me, I said, my voice cutting through the din of the room. I am here to settle the account for patient Otis Vance. The woman looked up, blinking behind thick glasses. Vance, she repeated, tapping on her keyboard. He is in the cardiac recovery ward. His insurance was declined yesterday, Mum. We were preparing discharge papers for transfer to a state facility. I pulled out my black card and slid it across the counter. That won't be necessary, I said. Pay it in full, and add a private room upgrade if one is available. The woman stared at the card, then at me. Her attitude shifted instantly from dismissal to deference. Yes, of course, Ms. Vance. Right away. I took the receipt and walked toward the elevators. The ride to the third floor was slow and smelled of stale cafeteria food. When the doors opened, I navigated the maze of corridors until I found room 304. It was a shared room separated by a thin beige curtain. I could hear the wheezing of the patient in the bed by the door. My father was in the bed by the window. I stopped just outside the doorframe, staying in the shadows. I wanted to see him, but I did not want him to see me. Otis looked small. The man who had terrorized our household with his booming voice and his demands for respect was gone. In his place was a frail old man hooked up to a heart monitor, his skin gray against the white sheets. There was no sign of Viola. My mother was likely across town begging a distant cousin for a place to sleep on a sofa, or maybe she was sitting in a park wondering where her next meal would come from. And Tia was certainly not here. She was too busy dodging process servers and trying to find a new mark to care about the father she had helped bankrupt. A nurse was adjusting his IV drip, checking his vitals with a gentle efficiency. "Is there anyone we can call for you, Mr. Vance?" she asked softly. "Your wife, perhaps? Or a daughter?" Otis stared up at the ceiling tiles, his eyes watery and red. "No," he rasped, his voice weak and trembling. "My wife is gone. My daughter Tia. She is hiding. And my other daughter Zora. Well, she is gone too. But that is my fault." The nurse made a sympathetic noise, patting his arm. "You need to rest, Mr. Vance. Stress is bad for your heart." Otis shook his head slowly, a single tear leaking from the corner of his eye and tracking down his temple. "I made a mistake, nurse," he whispered. "A terrible mistake. I spent my whole life polishing a piece of glass thinking it was a jewel. I gave everything to Tia. I gave her my home, my pride, my love. And when I fell, she stepped over me. But Zora." He choked on a sob, his chest heaving painfully. Zora was the one who was always there. She was the one who worked hard. She was the one with the integrity, and I treated her like a servant. I chose the wrong child to love, nurse. I threw away a diamond to pick up a bead. I stood frozen in the hallway. I had waited 34 years to hear those words. I had fantasized about him apologizing, about him realizing my worth. But now that it was happening, I did not feel the rush of triumph I expected. I just felt a deep, hollow sadness. It was too late. His realization did not undo the years of neglect. It did not buy back the house he lost. It did not erase the slap my mother gave me. It was just the regret of a dying king who realized he had burned his own kingdom. I reached into my purse and pulled out a plain white envelope. Inside was $5,000 in cash. It was enough to buy food, decent clothes, and perhaps rent a small room for a month or two. It was a lifeline, but it was not an invitation. I stepped into the room just far enough to catch the nurse's attention. She looked up surprised to see a stranger in expensive clothes standing there. I put a finger to my lips, signaling her to be quiet. I placed the envelope on the bedside table just out of Otis' line of sight. He was still looking at the ceiling, lost in his misery. "Ensure he gets this when he is discharged," I whispered to the nurse. "Tell him it is from a donor who wishes to remain anonymous." I turned around before she could ask any questions. I walked back down the hallway, the sound of my father's weeping fading behind me. I did not go in to hold his hand. I did not go in to tell him I forgave him. Some bridges are burned so thoroughly that they cannot be crossed again, even in pity. I had paid his debt, but I was done paying for his mistakes. The morning of the auction broke with a gray, relentless drizzle that soaked into the fabric of everything it touched. The bungalow on Elm Street looked like a tombstone, its windows dark, and its lawn overgrown with the chaotic weeds of neglect. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, huddling under umbrellas or standing with collars turned up against the chill. They were not neighbors coming to pay their respects. They were vultures. Real estate investors, house flippers, and bargain hunters looking to pick the meat off the bones of my parents' financial ruin. Standing just outside the perimeter of the yellow caution tape were Viola and Tia. They looked like tragic figures from a play that had run too long. My mother was wearing a coat that had seen better days, clutching her purse to her chest, as if it contained the last of her dignity. Tia stood beside her, shivering in a trench coat, scanning every car that turned onto the street. Her eyes were wide and desperate, darting back and forth with a manic intensity. I knew exactly what they were looking for. They were looking for me. In their minds, life was a movie. They believed in the grand gesture, the last-minute reprieve where the hero swoops in to save the day despite everything. They had convinced themselves that I would not let the family home be sold to strangers. They thought I would pull up in my luxury car, step out in slow motion, and outbid everyone, reclaiming the legacy they had squandered. They thought my anger had a limit, and that the sale of their home crossed it. They were wrong. I was not there. I was sitting in my office 30 miles away, watching the digital feed of the county auction site on a secondary monitor while I reviewed a merger agreement. I saw the numbers ticking up. I saw the bids coming in. But I did not click the button to participate. I sipped my coffee and watched the inevitable unfold with the detached interest of an auditor reviewing a bankrupt ledger. The auctioneer standing on the porch where my father had once smoked his cigars began the chant. The price started low, shockingly low, reflecting the liens and the market conditions. A man in a beige windbreaker raised his hand. A woman with a tablet countered. The price climbed slowly, efficiently, stripping away 40 years of memories with every increment of $5,000. Viola gripped Tia's arm, her knuckles white. She whispered something, probably an assurance that I was just running late, that I would appear any second to stop this madness. She looked at her watch, then back at the street. She stood on her tiptoes, trying to see over the heads of the bidders. She was waiting for the miracle she felt she was owed. Going once, the auctioneer droned, his voice bored. Tia pulled out her phone, dialing my number for the 100th time. It went straight to voicemail, just as it had for the last 2 weeks. She lowered the phone, her face crumpling. Going twice. Viola let out a small, stifled sob. She took a step forward as if to physically stop the proceedings, but she had no standing here. She was a trespasser on her own lawn. She looked around wild-eyed, searching for the daughter she had slapped, the daughter she had betrayed, hoping I was hiding in the crowd, waiting for the dramatic reveal. Sold, the auctioneer shouted, slamming his clipboard against the railing. To bidder number 452. Congratulations, sir. The man in the beige windbreaker nodded, making a note on his phone. He did not look at the house with love. He looked at it as an asset, a line item, a thing to be gutted, remodeled, and flipped for a 30% profit. He walked past Viola and Tia without even seeing them. He walked up the steps, took the keys from the bank representative, and unlocked the door. Viola collapsed against the chain-link fence, her legs giving out. The movie had ended, but the credits did not roll. The hero did not come. The house was gone. I closed the browser window on my computer. I did not feel a pang of regret. Saving that house would have been the cruelest thing I could do. It would have taught them that there are no consequences. It would have confirmed their belief that they could abuse me, exploit me, and discard me, and I would still be there to clean up their mess because we were family. By letting the house go, I was giving them the only gift I had left to give: reality. Tia stared at the closed door of the bungalow, the rain plastering her hair to her face. She looked at our mother weeping on the wet sidewalk. For the first time, the delusion cracked. She realized that Zora the bean counter, Zora the doormat, was dead. The woman who existed now was a stranger to them, a stranger who owed them nothing. There was no safety net. There was no backup plan. There was only the cold, hard pavement and the road ahead, which they would have to walk alone. They turned away from the house, huddled together against the cold, and began the long walk to the bus stop, leaving the past behind them in a pile of wet leaves. The smell of stale grease and burnt coffee hung heavy in the air at the burger barn, a stark contrast to the lavender and old money scent of the Ritz-Carlton lobby. I stood in line behind a man in construction boots, tapping my phone against my palm. I did not need to be here. There were plenty of high-end cafes near my office where the baristas knew my name and my order. But curiosity is a powerful force, and I wanted to see the final variable in the equation I had solved. I watched the woman behind the counter. She was wearing a polyester uniform that was a garish shade of orange, a visor pulled low over hair that had lost its expensive sheen. She was wiping down a tray with a gray rag, her movements jerky and resentful. It was Tia. The sister who had once told me that sweating was for poor people was now covered in a thin sheen of perspiration as she tried to keep up with the lunch rush. She looked up as I stepped to the register. The customer service smile she had plastered on her face vanished instantly, replaced by a look of pure shock and then raw defensiveness. She froze, her hand hovering over the keypad. "Zora," she whispered, her voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" I looked at the menu board above her head, pretending to consider my options. "I heard they have decent coffee," I said, my tone conversational. "I will have a large black coffee." Tia did not move. Her eyes darted around the busy restaurant, checking to see if anyone was watching, if anyone recognized the fallen socialite serving fries. When she looked back at me, her eyes were wet. "Are you here to laugh at me?" she hissed, leaning over the counter so her manager would not hear. "Is this the victory lap, Zora? You took everything from me. I am living in a studio apartment above a laundromat. I take the bus. I smell like fryer oil every night. Are you happy now? Are you satisfied seeing me like this? I lowered my sunglasses, looking her directly in the eye. I saw the fatigue etched into her face, the lines of bitterness around her mouth. She wanted me to feel guilty. She wanted me to apologize for her downfall. I did not take anything from you, Tia, I said calmly. I simply stopped letting you take from me. You lost the things that never belonged to you in the first place. The money was Preston's. The lifestyle was a mirage funded by theft. What you have now, this job, this uniform, this reality, this is yours. She flinched, as if I had reached across the counter and slapped her. I have nothing, she spat, tears spilling over. I am a waitress, Zora. I am a nobody. I shook my head. You are wrong. You have your health. You have 2 working hands. And you have an opportunity. You used to mock me for working late. You used to laugh at my spreadsheets and my ambition. You called me a bore because I earned my way while you charmed yours. Well, now you are learning. You are learning that $1 earned by standing on your feet for 8 hours is worth more than $1,000,000 stolen from a trust fund. This is not a tragedy, Tia. It is a lesson. Learn how to make clean money, just like I did. The manager, a heavy-set man with a stain on his tie, shouted from the back. Tia, order up. Stop chatting and move. Tia jumped, wiping her face with the back of her hand. She looked at me one last time, her expression a mix of hatred and begrudging resignation. She punched in the order, her fingers trembling. That will be $2.50. I reached into my purse. I bypassed the smaller bills and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. It was more money than she likely made in 2 shifts. I placed it on the sticky counter. I watched her look at the money. I saw the war inside her, the pride fighting against the desperation. She needed that money. She needed it for rent, for food, for the bus fare. Keep the change, I said, my voice devoid of malice. Consider it a tip. I did not wait for my coffee. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, the bell above the door chiming cheerfully. I walked back to my car, stepping over a puddle in the parking lot. I did not feel triumphant. I felt resolved. Tia was exactly where she needed to be, starting from zero, just like I had. Whether she climbed up or stayed down was finally up to her. The obsidian villa was glowing tonight, not with the frantic energy of a family trying to impress strangers, but with the steady warmth of genuine success. I had hired a jazz quartet to play on the terrace, and the air was filled with the clinking of glasses and the hum of intelligent conversation. This was not a party for show. It was a gathering of the people who had stood by me when the floor fell out from under my life. My partners from the firm were there, holding court near the fireplace. Evelyn, my shark of a lawyer, was laughing with a judge near the bar, and moving through the crowd with the easy grace of a man who had shed a heavy burden, was Preston. He spotted me on the balcony and walked over holding 2 flutes of champagne. He looked younger than he had 6 months ago. The tension that used to line his forehead, the subtle stoop of a man carrying an ungrateful wife, was gone. He was sharp, clear, and finally free. To the architect of our liberation, Preston said, handing me a glass. You throw a hell of a party, Zora. Much better than the last one. I laughed, a genuine sound that felt good in my chest. The bar was set pretty low. Preston, at least this time the entertainment does not involve a bolt cutter and the police. We stood side by side, looking out over the manicured gardens, where Marcus used to strut around pretending to be the lord of the manor. The shadows were still there, but they held no power over me anymore. I heard about Tia, Preston said quietly. A friend saw her at the burger place. He said she looked humbled. She is learning, I replied, taking a sip of the crisp wine. It is a hard curriculum, but it is the only one that sticks. Do you miss her? Preston thought for a moment, swirling the liquid in his glass. I miss the idea of her. I miss having someone to come home to. But I do not miss the lies. I do not miss checking my bank accounts, wondering where the money went. And I certainly do not miss the feeling of being the mark in my own marriage. What about you? Do you miss? Marcus. I looked at the spot where the police car had parked the night they took him away. I miss my ignorance sometimes, I admitted. It was easier thinking I was just boring. It was easier believing they loved me in their own broken way. But I do not miss him. I miss the time I wasted trying to be small enough for him to feel big. He turned to me, clinking his glass against mine. Well, here is to being big, Zora. Here is to never shrinking again. There was a moment, a pause where in a lesser story we might have leaned in. We were both single. We were both successful. We shared a trauma that no one else could understand. But as I looked at Preston, I did not see a lover. I saw a mirror. We were survivors, veterans of the same war. And while we would always be allies, we did not need to be anything more. We had saved each other so we could stand on our own, not so we could lean on someone else. I checked my watch. It is time, I said, setting my glass on the railing. Preston raised an eyebrow. Time for the closing. I corrected. I led him into the study, the room where my father had tried to bully me into submission. Sitting at the desk was not my father, but a notary and a real estate agent. A stack of documents sat waiting in the center of the leather blotter. You are selling it, Preston asked, surprised. But you won. It is yours. That is exactly why I am selling it, I said, picking up the pen. It is a trophy. Preston and trophies just collect dust. Every room in this house has a memory. I want to evict. The wine cellar, the living room where my mother slapped me, the driveway where Marcus threw my bag. I claimed it. I conquered it. And now, I am liquidating it. I signed my name on the final line. Zora Vance with a flourish. The ink was dark and permanent. I handed the pen back to the notary. It is done, I said. The funds will be wired to my charitable foundation by morning. I am using the proceeds to fund the legal defense initiative for victims of financial abuse. Preston smiled a wide, admiring grin. You are terrifying, Zora. And I mean that as the highest compliment. We walked back out to the party, leaving the empty house behind us. The guests were cheering for a toast, but I was already looking past them toward the door. I had one last flight to catch, one last scene to play, before the credits rolled. The villa was just a building. My life was waiting for me outside the gates. The private terminal at O'Hare was quiet, a sanctuary of glass and steel that separated the travelers who waited in lines from the travelers who owned the lines. I sat in a leather armchair sipping a mimosa and watching the ground crew load the luggage into the belly of the Gulf Stream. My luggage was Louis Vuitton vintage and authentic, unlike the knockoffs Tia used to parade around town, intending to fool people into thinking she mattered. I picked up the newspaper on the table. It was tucked away in the business section. Page 4, but the headline was satisfying enough. Local entrepreneur sentenced to 10 years for wire fraud and money laundering. Marcus Vance would be trading his crypto schemes for cigarette currency in a federal penitentiary. The judge had been particularly unimpressed with his attempt to blame his wife for his crimes. 10 years. By the time he got out, the world would have moved on, and he would be nothing more than a footnote in a case study about financial stupidity. I thought about Tia. The last update from the private investigator was brief. She was still working at the burger joint, living in a basement apartment that smelled of damp and regret. She had tried to sell her story to a tabloid, but without proof, and with the threat of Preston's lawyers hanging over her head, nobody would touch it. The golden child had tarnished. She was learning the hard way that beauty fades, but a criminal record lasts forever. She was finally living a life she could actually afford. And my parents, Viola and Otis, were settling into a state-subsidized senior living facility on the south side. It was clean and safe, but it was not the villa. There were no crystal chandeliers, no vintage wines, and no servants to order around. They had a small room, a shared television, and plenty of time to think about the choices they had made. They called me sometimes, leaving voicemails that oscillated between begging for money and cursing my name. I never listened past the first 3 seconds I had blocked their numbers, but sometimes the voicemail system let one slip through just to remind me why I left. People always say that blood is thicker than water. They use it as a weapon to keep you tethered to toxic people, to force you to forgive the unforgivable just because you share a genetic code. But in my line of work, I know that sometimes blood is just a biohazard. Sometimes you have to drain the bad blood to save the body. I had spent 34 years trying to buy their love, trying to earn their respect, trying to be enough. It was a bad investment. The return was negative, so I did what any good accountant would do. I cut my losses, I liquidated the assets, and I closed the account. Ms. Vance, the pilot said, approaching me with a respectful nod. We are ready for departure whenever you are. The flight time to the Amalfi Coast is approximately 9 hours. I stood up, smoothing the lapel of my white blazer. I picked up my bag and walked toward the tarmac. The sun was shining, reflecting off the silver wings of the jet. I walked up the stairs, not looking back at the terminal, not looking back at the city, not looking back at the wreckage of the life I used to live. I settled into the plush seat and buckled the belt. As the engines roared to life, pushing me back against the leather, I put on my dark sunglasses. The plane taxied down the runway, gaining speed, rushing toward the horizon. I felt the moment the wheels left the ground, the sudden weightlessness of true freedom. I looked out the window as Chicago shrank beneath me, turning into a grid of gray and green. I was Zora, I was a partner, I was survivor. And for the first time in my life, my net worth was exactly what I decided it was. I smiled as the plane punched through the clouds into the blue sky above. Zora's journey teaches us a powerful truth. Your value is never defined by how much you provide for others, but by who you are on your own. For years, she sought validation from a family that only saw her as a resource, proving that sometimes shared DNA is just a biological coincidence, not a bond of loyalty. True freedom comes when you stop financing your own disrespect and start investing in your own peace. We learned that walking away from toxicity isn't an act of cruelty. It is a necessary act of survival. You are the CEO of your own life. Never let anyone else cook the books. If you believe in cutting off toxic ties to build a better future, hit that like button, subscribe, and share your own story of resilience in the comments below.